Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Tuesday to you. Josh, of severe weather. Thanksgiving just 9 days away here in the U.S., and we're going to have some interesting weather coming up in the next couple of weeks that may impact your travel. Starting with a big storm that is about to move into the western United States here over the next couple of days, and more active weather continuing into Thanksgiving week and beyond as colder air comes down. Many of you are likely to see some snow in the next 2 weeks, and I've got an area kind of outlined where snow may fall in purple, but there is a potential not just for a big storm moving into the west this week, but maybe another storm next week right after Thanksgiving that I'll be keeping an eye on for you here with some snow possible. And that could impact some of your travel as well. Now, I do want to wrap things up in the tropics. Fortunately, the remains here of Sarah pretty much gone by the wayside. You can see the moisture coming up into the Gulf states. It's been very wet. But we've avoided nothing really more than just some soaking rain, fortunately. Some heavy rain in the New Orleans area earlier this morning. And on the other side, things are finally quieting down here with the remains of Man-yi now about to fall apart as they approach Vietnam. We do have a cyclone in the Indian Ocean, no threat to land other than Mauritius and Reunion here, but at that point it will be weakening. So we never say never as far as shutting the door on the tropics, but right now things are going to look a lot less favorable for anything to form the rest of this month. If they do, in the Atlantic side, this is the area we're probably going to have to watch, and it's not looking super favorable. And we'll keep an eye on the subtropics in here for maybe a rogue system. But this season, definitely destructive. The ideas were right. We did have longer periods of no activity that cut the totals down a little bit, but it was still a very hyperactive season. And I think we're basically out of the woods here in the United States for anything new. Here's a look at the satellite, and you can see just a huge blowup of storms here as our cold front interacts with the moisture left over from Sarah. It is not going to redevelop into anything tropically, just some heavy rain heading into northern Florida and southern Georgia and Alabama here today and tonight. But no strong winds expected with this. Things definitely unraveled a lot more quickly, and that is good news. On the Pacific side, we do have to keep an eye on heavy rain here. Maybe something brief tries to spin up. But again, I'm not super worried about it at this point. Wind shear is going to climb here in the next few days, and that's going to keep anything from concentrating too much. Now, this front here that's moving through this portion here of the Gulf of Mexico is going to head south and get stuck across the northern Caribbean, and some of the same areas that got a lot of rain with Sarah are likely to see more of it Thursday night, Friday, maybe the first part of this weekend. Some of our models in northwest Honduras and eastern Guatemala are showing potentially more than 6 inches of more rain on top of the 40 they just received. So my thoughts and prayers are with everybody there. One other thing you're going to see on the screen here is this huge amount of moisture aimed at northern Cal and southwest Oregon. This is an atmospheric river, and we do have a storm center to the northwest of it that is going to increase significantly. I'm going to talk about that in this video here as well, as that will be a nasty storm here for the west coast. Here's a look at wind shear across the rest of the tropics here. It is very high across the Gulf, coming up in the southwest Caribbean this week and beyond, and it'll be pretty high into next week. Despite the warm waters, I think this is probably going to shut things down, although never say never. I just am not super excited about the prospects of another storm. The only area that has very low wind shear is confined basically to the southwest Caribbean, and that's pretty close to land, so unlikely anything's going to form down in there. Now, talking about the United States, the map is getting a lot more colorful here as we see signs of winter coming in with a vengeance. And this is not unusual in November. Winter starts sooner than those of us here in the east and southern U.S. would often see. But we do have circled in red here a blizzard warning in effect for the Cascade mountain range. And some of the lower elevations have winter storm watches and warnings as well. And a flash flood watch here for Northern California, mainly the coastal plain. We also have a winter storm warning for portions of northern North Dakota that extends into the prairies and advisories surrounding that. And we do have our first winter storm watch for the mountains of West Virginia and Western Maryland. Still a red flag warning for low fuel and fire danger across Massachusetts. And it's been a very dry fall, as those of you in the east know, but that is about to come to an end. We finally have some relief coming from our dry spell that we've been in. We're going to talk about that in this video. Take a look at this. This is our atmospheric river extending across the northern Pacific, aimed right at northern Cal and southwest Oregon. There's a developing low pressure system that is deepening. This is what we call bombing out into a bomb cyclone. That is, the pressure's dropping very quickly, and just a very impactful storm. And we do have a high risk of widespread flash flooding around Eureka, California, and inland, extreme amounts of snow that may get beyond 3 or 4 feet of snow potentially. Rates are going to be over 3 inches an hour with winds on top of that of 65 miles per hour. So the ski areas will benefit in the longer run, but travel is highly discouraged here with all of the snow coming tonight and continuing through tomorrow and through much of the day on Thursday. And winds at the coast are going to be up to hurricane force as well, 60 miles per hour or more. So I expect we're going to have some major damage here across the West Coast, in particular Northern California. Just a nasty atmospheric river. Looking at the wave heights, you'll be able to see here as our storm gathers, it's going to look like a hurricane on this model. It basically is pressure-wise, but obviously it's not tropical. Take a look at some of these wind swells here. We're talking about wave heights that are going to go over 40 feet, maybe over 50 feet here, just offshore. So very dangerous for mariners here with this massive storm, this bomb cyclone here. And there'll be more storms to come. You can see the next one lined up here in a couple of weeks, although that's to be determined. Take a look at the pressure on this storm. The icon says it's 972 millibars this morning, dropping down to 940 millibars. That's the equivalent of what would be a Category 4 hurricane. Now, it's not a tropical process, but it is a powerful storm and one that may break the pressure record here in the northeastern Pacific. So very, very intense system here. That will be aimed northward and will cycle around an upper low, so it never really makes landfall. But we continue to have the river of moisture that comes in on the southeast side of it into the west coast here. So very rough end to November here in the Pacific Northwest. Take a look at this here. 940 millibars during this evening. Huge area of rain moves on shore here. We're going to see incredible snow in the higher elevations, extreme rain rates here as well. And that just doesn't move. Tomorrow night, even into Thursday, we continue to get crushed with heavy rain, and another wave comes Thursday night into Friday before things get a little bit quieter here for the weekend. But we may not see much sunlight here on the West Coast over the next week, and travel is going to be pretty difficult on coastal areas here over the next week and give or take even longer. Here's a look at our potential for rain to pile up here. And just through this weekend, we're talking amounts as high as 22 inches, mainly here around the bend of Northern California, locally 10 to 20 inches of rain. And the average of these models shows possibly even higher amounts closing in on 2 feet. Unlike with Tropical Storm Sarah in the Caribbean, this is a much bigger area. But fortunately one that maybe isn't as rugged, but still we're going to see mudslides in here, incredible amounts of snow, very strong winds, very rough wave action. When you get to the I-5 corridor, it does come down quite a bit in Oregon, but we still are going to see several inches of rain here. In inland parts of the West, we'll see significant amounts of rain and certainly heavy mountain snow as well. As far as snow from the storm, it's going to be pretty impressive here. The ski areas are going to get just dumped on here between now and the end of the week. We see on our models the potential through Sunday night of as much as almost 200 inches of snow. That'll probably be in the mountains here, British Columbia and Washington, but also the California mountains are going to see perhaps over 6 feet of snow. Very impressive system here, to say the least. We're going to see a lot in the prairies as well, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that here in the coming parts of this video, but I do want to respect your time, so this video is going to be a little shorter than usual, but still lengthy enough, I think, if we're technical here. This is the Madden-Julian Oscillation. It is coming out of Phase 2 into Phase 3 this week, and around to 4 and 5. So as we go past Phase 5 over into this part here, we start to head into colder phases. So December is definitely looking colder. This also shows us this time of the year that we're out of the favorable environment for tropical development. We had 3 named storms in November, which ties the record in the Atlantic Basin. As things move along in this direction, things are going to be a lot less favorable for tropical activity. And we're to the point where we keep an eye on this to see how cold air is going to be impacting North America. And definitely as we get into 6, 7, 8, and 1, we have that setting up for us here in December. And part of the reason I'm watching Europe so closely is that we are going to see a lot of snow in Europe here over the next couple of weeks. Take a look at this. Lots of snow falling across the Alps, across Eastern Europe, and across the mountains of Turkey and the Middle East here. And this is pretty, not extreme, but it's pretty high to see this much snow on the ground here so soon here in Europe, and obviously across northern parts of Russia. But when that happens, as soon as the air comes across the North Pole and down into the United States, we have what's called cross-polar flow. And this allows much more substantial cold to come down. Now, we are heading towards a La Nina. We're not there yet. This typically means a milder winter across the southern and eastern U.S., but colder across the plains. And there will be bouts of very cold air that come down, even though we average it out milder across the country. But we can see our first intrusion of this coming in here next week. Take a look at some of this cross-polar flow. You can see how things connect here early next week. Now, initially, it's still mild across the east around this time next week. But we do have this shot of cold that comes down and builds into the Rockies here. With all that fresh snow, it will not be difficult for it to get cold here. As we move this along, you can see high pressure building over Alaska. And what that does is allows cold air to come into the Intermountain West and eventually into the central U.S. And this was going to be the setup here, I think, for potentially a significant winter storm over the central U.S. On Black Friday and on Saturday. The cold air is coming down here. We've got higher pressure building in across this area, so the cold gets dislodged and comes down in this direction. So this could be our first decent shot of wintry cold here before we even get through the month of November. Now, as we head to December here, there will still be cold air left behind, but the pattern is not going to be quite as extreme by the time we get there, but that could change again. This is the Arctic oscillation, and when it's negative, that's when we have colder air on the North American side than on the European side, and it's negative, but it does come up some and then remains close to zero. I like to look at these teleconnections. The Eastern Pacific here just tanks, meaning the atmospheric river is going to be pretty nuts here. Lots of stormy activity here across the eastern part of the Pacific, and it does come to more neutral here by the time we get to the start of December, but at least the next 2 weeks are going to be pretty busy. The North American oscillation, this is the chance of East Coast storms when it's negative, blocking across Greenland when the NAO is negative. You'll see there's a block in place through this weekend, then not much of one after that. So that's kind of back and forth. We're going to have to keep an eye on that. The Pacific North American oscillation, when this is positive is when cold air comes into the southeast. And you can see it's mostly negative over the next couple of weeks, so we don't really have a great chance for a substantial winter-type storm yet in the southeast. It does go positive later this week, so it'll be colder towards the weekend, but it does go back to negative. So again, this is not super favorable for anything early in the season yet in the southeast, outside of the Appalachians, of course. And you can see here the Western Pacific oscillation is pretty negative and stays that way. So the Pacific's going to be pretty active here. Here's a look at temperature anomalies. The red indicates much above average weather, and these colors indicate much below. So as it stands today, it's pretty warm across the east and much of Canada, but very cold towards eastern Alaska, the Northwest Territory, Yukon, and the western United States. As we move, though, into Thursday and Friday, you can see it gets much colder across the eastern U.S., still pretty warm, though, across northeastern Canada, and then finally warming up with that Pacific moisture onslaught here on the west coast. As we get to the weekend, it'll be a cold weekend across the southeast. We may see freezing temperatures farther south than we've seen. A little late this season for that, but it's coming. And then next week, we transition back to milder weather to start the week. With a big front that's moving eastward here on Thanksgiving and especially Black Friday, as we'll see a mild Thanksgiving on the Gulf Coast region and then much cooler weather Black Friday into the following weekend. So could be very interesting here with much of the country kind of getting some cold turkey here by the time we get to Saturday night and Sunday and approaching the month of December. We will have a bit of severe weather potential here. I don't think it's super great, but thunderstorm action all the way up to East Tennessee, Western Carolinas here tonight. And approaching the west coast of Florida, we could have heavy rain, but not a big outbreak for severe weather. The marginal risk for severe weather tomorrow across the Carolinas has been dropped, but we still have a risk for some lightning all the way up into southern New England and the Northeast and all the way down into Florida. There could be a few heavier storms that move through Florida, but I don't think we're talking a big severe weather outbreak, and it's unlikely we get a big tornado outbreak at this point, just some locally heavy rain and some lightning strikes. Here's what the NAM model is doing with our storm as it moves east here. You'll see rain moves into western Florida, southern Georgia, and then another band of showers moving into the Carolinas tonight. Most of our rain is going to come ahead of our front, but we may see another wave coming through tomorrow afternoon and evening. Just to the east of the Appalachians, Shenandoah Valley up into western PA. And notice how the colder air starts to wrap into this around dark tomorrow night and just after dark. And we will see rain changing over to snow in portions of the Midwest and around the Great Lakes region here. As we take this further into time, you'll see heavy rain moves into the Northeast later tomorrow night. We'll see snow beginning to pivot southward out of our upper level low across Michigan, Wisconsin, even some snow into Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. And the higher elevations by morning on Thursday, we'll start to see some heavier snow across West Virginia, Western Virginia, Western Pennsylvania, And lower elevations across Michigan will see a mix going over to snow. And you'll see that colder air kind of goes in underneath our storm. So the cold air actually wraps in south instead of north. And so here's that conveyor of cold. Here's the milder Atlantic air that's still kind of mixed into this. And we'll have low pressure here somewhere across southwest Ontario. So it's more likely to be raining in Wisconsin and snowing in Illinois than vice versa, which is a bit unusual. It's more likely that we get heavy rain on Thursday afternoon across New England, but maybe some heavy mountain snow in the higher elevations of the Northeast as well. And we'll continue to have snow falling here as we head into Friday as that colder air wraps in here. Take a look at Thursday evening. Could be interesting here on the I-70 corridor. Not a big snowfall, but one we need to watch. Now, rain totals, these are going to be impressive in western Florida, southern Georgia, southeast Alabama, potentially 3 to 4 inches of rain max. We have another maximum of rain, though, tomorrow evening into Friday morning across the Northeast here. And many places have the potential to pick up more than 2 inches of very needed rainfall. It may not be welcome rain, but we could certainly use it. And we still may not break, or we still may have records intact for the driest 3-month period in parts of New Jersey, but this will help get us close to those records not being broken at that point. And then later next week, around Thanksgiving, another more substantial storm could be moving east with some heavy rain as well. And we're going to talk about that in the coming days. Here's a closer look at the Northeast. You can see rain advances tomorrow into the Northeast. By tomorrow night and early Thursday, we'll have heavy rain around New York City, north of Philly, and then into New England here during the night, Thursday night into Friday morning. Generally speaking, a couple inches of rain is expected. When you get farther south of D.C. into North Carolina, though, amounts will be coming down significantly, and we're not going to see a lot of rain across the Carolinas out of this system. Here's the GFS model from earlier, and you can see our front really gets going here. Our low deepens. These dashed blue lines indicate cold air and stronger winds that wrap in here, allowing just a much chillier air mass in place. There's an upper low right in here. You can kind of see that by these thickness values here down to 528 decameters here. We also have a surface low that's going to help inject moisture into this system on the East Coast. But what we don't have is a remnant low from Sarah. It looked like we might try to get that a few days ago, but the models threw us some curveballs. So the West gets blasted, the Northeast and Central Appalachians get blasted. This system still hangs out even into Eastern Canada through the weekend. We're dealing with rain and higher elevation snow. It's chilly, but we do see some moderation in time for the week leading up to Thanksgiving. Now, after that, another storm moves into the west here. Colder air finally moves in from the northwest. And next week, we may be dealing with more substantial amounts of snow. And the models are a little different how that plays out. They have a weaker system jetting across the country early next week, then another system down south on Thursday and Friday. But look at this cold that's coming down in time for the beginning of December. Many of you putting out your Christmas lights will be freezing your baguettes off here on Saturday night and Sunday, December 1st here. 1045 high comes down. Lake effect snow may kick in here. So it doesn't look like a lot on the map, but when I start showing you snow totals, you will see that it is in fact coming. Winter is coming, and December 1st is the beginning of meteorological winter. Here's the European model from earlier, and we now have European data up to 15 days. It used to be 10. So we may get some fantasy storms in a long range like we see on the GFS, but here's a look right now. Big low over the Northeast on Friday, big low moving into the West this weekend. Unsettled in the Northeast Saturday into Sunday, then a little bit warmer and brighter by early next week. Another system moves in. We're going to deal with primarily rain here as that milder air surges back up, but take a look at what's coming. Another wave comes down here, and this is Turkey Day here on Thursday. Wet across the eastern United States, turning much colder behind this system. And Friday and Saturday, we may have a winter storm to deal with here across the plains. And I don't know if it's going to look exactly like this, but you can see with all that cold coming down, places like Oklahoma and the Ozarks and even North Texas may be in play for some wintry precipitation, believe it or not. This is a pretty powerful front right in here, and we're probably talking 60s and 70s here and teens, 20s, and 30s up in here, and that is the beginning of winter here, coming right on schedule here by the time we get to the 1st and 2nd of December. So let's take a look real quick at winter storm or snow totals here. Ignore this red here. You can see generally an inch or two, but locally higher spots across Michigan here over the next few days. I'm going to move through these pretty quickly. Please feel free to stop it if your town is getting just glossed over. Maybe a quick inch of snow around Chicago, especially off the pavement. Maybe a few inches around South Bend, an inch around Indianapolis and Dayton and Cincinnati, even northern and eastern Kentucky, including Louisville, could see flakes in the sky here Thursday night into Friday. Here's a closer look at Ohio. And you can see here, there may be some snow on the ground for that big game in Columbus against Indiana. Go Hoosiers. But you will see most of that snow will be falling here Thursday and into Thursday evening. You see what's going on in West Virginia. I'll get to that in just a little bit here. Here's Pennsylvania. We'll see a few inches here. The Poconos could see 4 or 5 inches, mainly elevational. You will also see some snow in western Maryland, east of Morgantown, Laurel Highlands, maybe up to 6 to locally 10 inches of snow. And I thought I had West Virginia. That's okay. I'm going to jump to southern West Virginia. And you can see here, snowshoe area could see 20 inches of snow. Now, not all that's going to stick, but at least a foot should. We'll even see elevational snow down into East Tennessee and into the northwest part of North Carolina. Of course, avoiding Johnson City, they get a little bit, but when you get east of there, Mountain City and those areas, we'll probably see a few inches of accumulation. Asheville could see flakes. The Smokies will see some snow. Pigeon Forge, Sevierville, all of those areas should see a little bit of accumulating snow. The impacts aren't going to be major, but there will be some moderate to high impacts here over the ski areas of West Virginia. Lighter amounts will lead to some impact here across the rest of the Great Lakes and the interior of the Northeast. And this is just through Thursday, so there may be more impacts on Friday that this is not covering. Here's a look real quick at some snow totals in the Northeast here. You can see around Binghamton, maybe close to an inch, higher amounts here in the Catskills, locally a foot. The Adirondacks could see over 6 inches, and we'll see some elevational snow across parts of New England as well. With amounts here, sorry about the jumpiness, amounts here that could get as high as 24 inches or so on Mount Washington, but those lower mountains could see a few inches as well, and will definitely get hit north of Quebec City, as well as over portions of Nova Scotia. Wind speeds, a lot of wind as this cold air rushes in. We're going to see gusts here tomorrow and tomorrow night that go past 40 miles per hour and then maybe over 50 miles per hour on Thursday, especially here in the Dakotas, around the Mississippi Valley and around the Great Lakes, and maybe even 60 mile per hour gusts across parts of western North Carolina. Now, I teased you all in the beginning here. We've talked about it, but here's a look at what our ensembles are hinting at as far as when and how much snow could fall in the next few weeks. And this part is subject to change more than the rest of my forecast, but a lot in the west here and several inches here across the prairies as well. Then you can see the snow here Thursday over the Great Lakes and in the higher elevations, still pounding parts of Northern California. More snow on Friday here across interior portions of the Northeast. And then over the weekend, things are going to settle down except in New England mostly. As we head to the end of the weekend, quieter in the east, more heavy snow across the Sierra Nevada. California gets crushed. And then you can see where this snow and this cold air start to progress early next week. We're going to see more in Utah and Colorado. We'll see a little bit here across the upper Midwest. Once we get closer to Thanksgiving, you will see higher amounts here. This is Thanksgiving. The ensembles show us a few inches of snow over a large swath here from Utah and Colorado all the way into Wisconsin, Michigan, and northern Ontario. And then we may continue to have some snow here as we get later into that weekend. So as folks are trying to travel back home, we have to worry about lake effect. We may still have to worry about some effects here in the plains and a new storm that will impact the west. Here's a look at how much snow I think will be on the ground over the next, 12 days, 11 days. And you can see here, this is just an ensemble mean. So this can change, but we're going to see a lot of it across the west, several feet. We're going to see a lot of it across northern and eastern Quebec, some in the prairies as well here. This is the area where the forecast is less certain, but with the right storm track, as that cold comes down here, we may be talking about snow down in Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico, possibly into parts of Missouri, Illinois, and certainly there'll be some elevational snow in here as well. And I would love to say I know exactly how much is going to fall, where, and when, but we're talking about a forecast that goes past 10 days. You know it'll change, but in general, the idea is there. And that's the idea I want you all to continue to just follow me along here, follow along with me here as I update you here on this upcoming winter and any severe weather in the south as well, we're going to talk about as well. So I appreciate everybody's time today. I said I wasn't going to go long. I think I did. But I hope everybody has a great Tuesday. I'll be back tomorrow and Thursday before I have to travel. But as always, I wish you all a blessed day, and I give all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Paul tells the church of Ephesus, Ephesians 6:10, to put on the armor of God. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything to stand firm then, with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. And the point here is very clear that we are up against evil in this world, but the word of God is our salvation. Accepting Jesus as our Savior is our salvation. And as a result, even though we're in spiritual warfare, we are battling every day. If you turn everything over to God, he will fight your battles for you. And all we have to do is put our faith in him. It doesn't mean we're going to live here forever. We will live eternally if we accept Jesus as our Savior. But while we're fighting these evil powers, while we're fighting through sin, we've already been forgiven for that, and we have the ability to have somebody back us up here and fight our battles for us. And the reason I'm sharing that with you today isn't because that's what most meteorologists talk about. It's because I truly believe that the devil is out there to go against people. He's out there and he knows about God. He wants you to believe more in him than God, but he knows about God. But the good part about the struggle we all face is that God has defeated the devil. And all you have to do is follow him. And that is the good news I wanted to share with you all today. So I'll catch up with you again tomorrow afternoon. I hope everybody takes care. See you soon.